Welcome back to mrctuning. Today we stripped down a 5.2 litre V10 engine in the Audi S8. The car originally came to us for a dyno run, then carbon clean, then stage 2. But as you'll see in this video, what started as a straightforward tuning job very quickly turned into something much bigger when we heard a metallic knock at the back of the engine. TLDR. This is what we found on the strip down. This tensioner was beginning to become slack, which reduced its efficiency to keep the chain tensioned. It's just lost all its flexibility there. So luckily we managed to diagnose this and replace the components with brand new, genuine parts. So let's get back to the start. We got the car strapped down to the dyno, started warming it up as normal. During the warm-up we picked up on two noises straight away, one coming from the inlet manifold and another coming from the rear of the engine. The first noise coming from the inlet manifold are the changeover flaps chattering. Now, this is a common problem with these engines. We see it all the time, and we'll go over this later in detail. However, the rear metallic noise was very concerning. These V10 engines are extremely expensive to repair, and the timing gear is all located at the back of the engine where the noise was coming from. So, rather than risking any damage, we made the call not to do any power runs at this point. We then checked the cam timing offsets and saw 1, 3, 2 and 1 degrees. Ideally this would be 0 across the board. Let's look at the engine in detail, specifically where the noise was coming from. So 4 3/8-inch roller chains operate at two levels. Roller chain A distributes power from the crankshaft to two intermediate sprockets. Roller chains B and C distribute power from these sprockets through additional sprockets to the camshafts. All chains are tensioned by hydraulic tensioners. Let's see the engine being removed and visually checked, then stripped down and see what we find.
So that is the S8 engine oil. Just going over it quickly before we start stripping it down, pulling all the exhaust off. So bank 1 cam cover, actually fairly clean, so no signs of any oil leak, which we were kind of expecting. On bank 2, however, there has been signs of an oil leak, especially down the back. It's just a little bit moist down there. So a quick update on the V10 engine strip. So we have now locked up the timing. So you can just see here, bank 2 timing locked for the cams. On the underside of the engine, just up there, so we've got the crank locking pin in. All timed up nicely. Over bank 2 you can see here, inlet cam screws in nice and easily. Exhaust cam goes in about 2 turns and then stops. Now we have moved our timing tool just to check, make sure this is right, so this has recently been used. Check it in on this cam for the other pin that we know screws in okay. This does the same thing. So it gets in a few turns and then stops. So it looks like someone has been in here before. It's difficult to show on the camera. The threads do look a little bit damaged, so it looks like someone's been in before trying to correct the timing and then damage some of the threads on the cam. So we're going to have to re-tap this just so we can get our locking tools in and hold the time on. The gearbox is now off, so we'll start getting the timing locked up on the bank 1, and then we'll pull the rear chain covers off and have a look what's going on. So update on the V10 timing chains. So we've now got all the chain covers off. What we've found is all the guides look okay. Everything seemed to be in really good condition. There was no sort of carbon build-up that we would have expected, so it's clearly had some decent service history in its life. But what we found, however, was this chain tensioner here. So this was really slack as we were turning it over, it was bouncing around, and as we were turning it over, it was clicking back in. You can also see this chain tensioner for bank 1 really far out, almost on its limits, and as we were turning it over, this was solid. So this didn't move, didn't take up any slack at all compared to the other side.
When we checked the chains and tensioners, we found that hydraulic tensioner for roller A was noticeably moving on engine rotation, and the tensioner for roller chain C was also compensating. The guides were warm but only visually, no scoring or problematic areas. So here's the hydraulic tensioner for roller A with the retaining pin in. So you can see that when we pull this out, it should spring quite far out. And it doesn't actually spring very far at all. it's got quite small movement now. It hasn't got much adjustment. So on engine rotation, this was pushing back quite easily and causing the chain to become slack. And that's the noise we heard there. And you can see the difference in how much force that should have by this other tensioner here. So this is the lower tensioner. So if I pull this retaining pin out here, you can see how much force that has to pull out. So that's what this one should be like, but this one's very slack. So lucky we found this.
Taking the cams out of this side, just gave a quick inspection over the rollers, just to make sure all these are okay, because the noise was from down this side. Looking at them all, they're all in good condition. There is some slight markings on the edges of the rollers, but it's just a sort of cosmetic mark. You can't actually feel it with your finger. So just while the cams are out and everything's apart, things we usually suffer with on the V10s. So these seals, due to the age and the heat, they go really brittle, so they turn to almost plastic. So the common one was C6 with that sort of the notorious 50p seal on the oil pump drives. So it's the same kind of rubber. They just get overly hot. These engines do run really, really high temperatures. So these become almost plasticky and brittle, just break and then cause oil leaks. Normally it's around these holes in the middle, and it just fills the spark plugs up with oil.
So we fitted new genuine components throughout, completely stripped and replaced all of the timing chains and components, including cam variators, coming to a parts cost of $2,800 plus VAT.
So both of these have been pulled out already, so the pins on the auxiliary chain drive and then the main sort of crank up to the cam pulley chain drive. So these pins have been pulled out already, so they're not really timing related. Both cam chain pins are still in for the tensions, so they're not fully tensioned yet. So they're still same again, got the crank locking tool in the bottom. And both camshaft locking tools in the top on both banks. So you just leave the main variator bolts loose, just so you got a little bit of slack and they can move. And then all we do is just pull the pins out, let them tension up nice and easily. So now these should be solid, unable to move, chains are nice and tight, and all the timing's still locked in place. So now we'll just go through, tighten all the variator pulley bolts up. So these have a tightening torque sequence, so it's a torque and then a degree, and you have to hold in a certain position as well. But we'll go through all the instructions, get them torqued down, as well as everything else in there, double check everything over, and then we'll turn it over and recheck the timing.
So that total job took 33 hours to complete. We would quote 30 to 40 hours, but as you saw, the engine was in good condition, apart from the tensioners. Total costings, the labour was slightly more than the parts cost. I'll let you work out the total cost for the job on our hourly rate on the website. So this is always the nervous moment, first start after everything's been put back together. We got our oil pressure up first by disconnecting the injectors so it wouldn't fire. We got all the oil into all the places that have been renewed. Also, because the cams were renewed, we wanted to make sure the oil got all up there.
First start up, after the rebuild, everything's on. We've done all the fluid checks. We have had to put the headlight and everything else back in. We overfilled that power steering fluid slightly. The airbox is going to have to come apart to change the filters after with first dyno run anyway, so we'll check all that afterwards. But all the fluids are in it, everything's there, and we are ready to start.
Straight away, the metallic tapping noise from the rear of the engine was completely gone. So the serious engine noise has now been rectified. However, we still have a noise coming from the top of the engine at the intake manifold. When the car was revved, you could hear this chatter. Like we said before, this is a common fault on these engines that we see very often. Now the system is really clever. Using variable length paths and changeover flaps, they direct the airflow through either a long or short intake path depending on load and RPM operating conditions. Now, in the lower RPM range, a long intake manifold path is opened in order to increase torque. In the upper RPM range, a short intake manifold path is opened. This short position produces an increase in engine power output and the peak power figures. Now, lots of people choose to remove the changeover flaps, which allows airflow to go everywhere. It still achieves peak power, but from our dyno testing, the drivability and low down torque is severely affected, as you'll see in the next video of this series, the dyno test. So on removal of the inlet manifold, we found the changeover flaps were working correctly and moving when controlled. However, the end of the shaft has some play, and this is the rattling noise we hear. Now, we cannot replace this end bearing. There's only repair kits for the flaps and shafts. Now, we would recommend replacing the intake manifold. However, due to the cost, and they are very expensive if you can find one. That's why people choose to deflap or fit a supercharger. On consultation with the customer, we decided to leave that as it was. The flaps are not broken, it doesn't pose an immediate threat of damage. We did notice significant carbon buildup on the valves when the intake was off, so we can look at the airflow on the next video and talk about the intake runners when we dyno the car. So thanks for watching, and see you next time for the important dyno test and carbon clean.